Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures. And boy oh boy, do I have one of my own personal holy grails in front of me today. Many thanks to the friend of mine that hooked me up with this. Barlowe's Guide to Extraterrestrials. This book has had such a profound impact on kind of everything that I was interested in moving forward in life. Back in the day, in the 80s, obviously this book actually came before the 80s. It was first published in 1979. I first stumbled across it in the early 80s at a bookstore next to my family's favorite Mexican restaurant that we would go and ransack every single Friday that we would head over there. But back when I was a kid, I had that Space Wars and Weapons book. Very much, it was a hodgepodge of old sci-fi art, and that really kind of got my brain coded for all this stuff. And when I first stumbled across this book, I probably had to have been maybe first or second grade. I couldn't have been that old. And it just blew my mind because not only did you have everything in this with the full color identifications, but it just got my curiosity. I mean, obviously, Star Wars was already a thing. I was already into all the various alien races of Star Wars. That was always the big selling point. I didn't care about stormtroopers or Jedis or whatever. I wanted to see monsters and funky creatures. That was where my interest lied. So the fact that I stumbled across this book before the days of the internet to have anybody even tell me about it, I was like, what is this? And this was one of those perpetual it'll be there next times. I'm sure all of us are quite familiar with it, as our parents told us, and as a parent, I've said it myself. Oh, don't worry, when there's something that the kids really want, it'll be there next time. And lo and behold, it was, until it wasn't. I never was able to get it. And of course, by the time, the internet became a thing and I was starting to look for it on my own, the prices were prohibitively expensive, and I just couldn't take the plunge. I really wanted this book, and lo and behold, a friend of mine had an extra copy of this. So, I mean, I was just ecstatic. This is one of those books that I've hunted for. And I mean, I'll be honest, this is probably what got me first interested in the attraction I had with all of the D&D monster manual type books, and all the bestiaries and all those types of tomes of beasts. And I hate to say this, I mean, I've got more monster manuals for various RPGs than I probably have rule sets that they're for. I've always had a fondness for this type of book, and I'm going to blame this one. This is probably the granddaddy of them all that really got me started down that road. And it's funny just how few of these books I have actually read. So we do have, and it's not like it's the biggest book in the world. It's about 100 pages. You do have, I don't remember who starts that off. But I think the thing that really got my imagination firing was just how weird things were. Got Lagoon here. I mean, nowadays I can recognize a lot of these names. Not everybody, but quite a few. They're just bizarre. I used to always think that thing was so funny looking. That was always a favorite. I had a friend of mine, I remember, who had a copy of this in junior high, who did a complete knockoff of the demon here for a class project. We had to put together some kind of like a science fiction type, shared universe thing in class. And I remember we absolutely pilfered as much as we could. And I want to say that the fantasy version of this had come out at that time. So we wholly stole from that as well. One of the neat things is that we have all of the physical and scientific characteristics of a lot of these creatures, which I always thought was pretty neat. A bunch of Jack Vance stuff in here. The reproduction habits of space aliens is something that I don't remember really getting into too much as a kid or paying much attention to it. The Garanishi from Harrison. I'm pretty sure I read that at some point. Ixchel. I don't remember them looking that exciting or as interesting, having read A Wrinkle in Time back in the day. painting the evolutionary stages. I mean, this book got so much of my brain firing, and I know, I can remember back in 6th grade, actually, a friend of mine, the two of us made our own version of just made up imaginary monsters and junk. It was around the time maybe 2nd edition D&D came out with the big white portfolios. Then we get to the middle with the big fold-out section. Funny enough, I knew what an old one was. The older things. By 6th grade, I think I'd already read Lovecraft. I always liked the artwork for the Overlord, and I never read Childhoods, and until I was probably in college, I think, I read a bunch of Clark stuff. I remember reading it, and I was sitting in a classroom, and it wasn't my classroom. I don't know if maybe I was already teaching. Maybe I'd already started my career, and I was supposed to be doing something else, and I was reading this instead. I remember sitting at a desk somewhere reading it, and when I was finishing it, and they fly off at the end, I was like, dang, that was cool. The Puppeteer. I know I've read some stuff from Ringworld. I don't remember them. I'm pretty sure you can find almost all of this stuff online if you really want it. It's not like the book has had any kind of re-releases since its original publication. I'm looking for the Navigator. I thought they were in here somewhere. It's on the front. Guild Steersman. This guy bugged me so much because I had already been traumatized by the Lynch Dune movie. And I had no idea. To me, this is not what they were supposed to. I loved the Lynch movie. My aunt took me to see it thinking it was going to be another Star Wars movie, but it was so much different and just screwed up. And she hated it. I loved it. This guy always reminded me, oh god, I had this line of toys. It wasn't Crystar. Lords of Change or something. Power Lords. They had this weird, it was a human figure, and he would flip around. He had a blue version, which I hated how he looked. I had the comics that Marvel published, and they had this cool looking bioorganic purple robot with butterfly wings, and there was this orange skin guy that always reminded me of this. He still does, in a blue jumpsuit. I have no idea. I want to say it was Power Lords, and they may have made new versions of those toys later on down the line. Come on, this is the kind of stuff. I know my son was looking through this, and he's like, this is more of what I want to see. He has this whole bag of old drawings that he's kept over the years, and he keeps insisting that I take digital photos of so we can eventually put it together into a composition book of all his bizarre creatures he's made as a child. Maybe I will one of these days. And again, I can recognize a lot of the names. The book's not so much. Where was the thing? I know he's in here somewhere. There he is. By the time I saw this book, I'd already watched the Carpenter version. I'm like, that's not as cool as the Carpenter stuff. I've actually read Half Spacesuit Will Travel, and for whatever reason, I always thought of the Vegans as vegans. I always thought of the Vegans as vegans. I don't know what it is. It's like giant meerkats. And this one, I'm sorry, I like Barlowe's art, and I especially liked the section we're going to get to, but I'm just going to completely disagree with him on the Volantians. I loved the Lensman stuff. Galactic Patrol was my jam. That book just hit the ground running, and it just did not let up. But unfortunately, I was familiar with the anime version, and I remember what Warzel looked like in the anime, and he was full on altered beast dragon looking dude. They were like dragons. This ain't a dragon. This is a worm with just extra limbs. And I mean, I love extra limbs, but this just did not sit right with me. Because even the books describe them, if I'm remembering my races of Lensmen correctly, because they had some weird stuff, like the pudgy tree trunk guys that I remember were chopping up the Boscones henchmen through the boarding parties with multiple axes in their tentacles or something. Man, that book was wild. I'm going to have to go dig that out now. But yeah, one of the cool things about this book is the back section has just a ton of reference sketches and work. And to me, that's almost more interesting than the actual artwork itself. I mean, Barlowe was no slouch when it came to, just really nice renderings and trying to understand the physical structure of these crazy creatures that he's coming up with. And to me, I mean, I may not be much of an artist, but I can absolutely respect the work going in that it did to come up with these ideas. To me, that's probably the coolest part about this book. And I think a lot of this was the preliminary idea for his alien planet thing that he would eventually go off and do. The Overlord flying around there. I don't know. So to me, just where this book comes from, what it represented. Look at those. Late 70s, early 80s haircuts. Fun stuff. Definitely a major, major impactful book on my life. And I'd have a funny feeling that quite a few of you out there have probably perused this tome at one point or another. So if you've got some fond memories of flipping through this like I do at the bookstore, by all means, I'd love to hear them down below. And if you guys have any similar style books that you would suggest I track down for purposes of this channel, or at least one of these Friday videos, by all means, please let me know. I've looked at the prices. I mean, the fantasy version is a little bit more reasonable out there, but this one for some reason just commands stupidly high prices, which is a shame. I mean, to me, these kinds of books, especially art books, and especially just, celebrating this stuff, to me seems to be like something that should be out there, kind of an evergreen type book. But, things change, tastes change, but unfortunately, mine don't. So, with that said, this has been definitely a trip down memory lane, but this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.